Good evening and happy 2022, and welcome to another edition of Black Press USA and NNPA's FIRE program. We have a lot to talk about, so make sure you reach out to your friends and family and make sure they get the link. Tell them to join us. We'd love to have your input. And throughout the program, feel free to ask a question, make a comment. Our guests will answer the questions, or I'll make sure I read them so the guests can answer them. We have two guests tonight. Our first guest is an author, and her name is Angel Allen Townsend. She is the author of My Trial of Tears from Pain to Peace. Let me do that again. My Trial of Tears from Pain to Peace. Let's welcome now Miss Angel Allen Townsend.
Hi,
Hi,
how are
Angel.
you, Taylor? Nice to see you again.
Yes, it is so nice to see you, and I can't wait to talk about it. I'm going to say this really slow. My Trail of Tears from Pain to Peace.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
this is a wonderful book that you have written. How long did it take you to put your thoughts together? Because when you get this personal as you've gotten in this book, I can't imagine it was a quick thing to put together.
It probably took about 2 years because it was very cathartic, and I did some healing as I was writing. So I would write, and I thought that I was over some things, and then I would process and cry and come back and write more. So it probably altogether took about 2 years from start to publication.
Now, I know that you are a whole life wellness coach and you're a certified consulting hypnotist. So, is writing in your background, or as you went through your process of helping other people, you decided to write this book?
I love to write. My mom is a writer and it's a part of me. And actually, when I started writing the book, I got a ghostwriter because I didn't think I could do it. I didn't trust my own abilities. So when I realized that I could probably best tell my story, I decided to take matters into my own hands and write it myself. And working as a consulting hypnotist and doing and coaching, I realized that there are a lot of people in pain and a lot of people who have experienced trauma. And I knew that I had my own background with trauma, and it made me even more want to write so that I could help people try to process some of the experiences they've had.
And I can imagine now that once we get to March of this year, we'll be, getting close to that third year of going through the pandemic. And we're not through it now. We're like, this is maybe the third or fourth wave, depending on who you ask. So I'm quite sure when it comes to trauma, it is really expanding from perhaps what a person may have gone through as a child to adult. And now when you're isolated at home, the way people have to be, I can't imagine the feeling of hopelessness.
Absolutely. And not only, the feeling of hopelessness and loneliness and depression and tension that you find between couples and families, because there's a lot of togetherness that we did not have to deal with before everybody started working from home and having to stay in the house. So you do see a lot more um, mental unrest. Let's put it that way, mental unrest that people need help coping with. And there's nothing wrong with getting some help. We see that on TV now more than ever with
Yes.
Simone Biles and all of the others that are saying it's okay to not be okay. So let's talk about it so we can be okay.
Does seem like a culmination of it just boiling up in the country itself. And then to the point that even celebrities have to step out and say, Taraji P. Henson talks about, mental health and needing it. And I think COVID really put people all in the same boat, so to speak, to be able to say, listen, I can't do this alone. And I need to let you know I'm just like you.
Yeah, and isn't it wonderful that that stigma is being removed so that people are okay with reaching out to get someone to talk to, especially in our community, because for so long we had that belief that we're okay, we don't talk about our problems. Going to talk to someone, see a therapist, see a hypnotherapist, that's something they do. We don't do that. We just stuff our feelings down with food,
Mm,
drugs,
mhm.
alcohol, and just keep going because we're supposed to be so strong. So, but we're not, because even while you look okay on the outside, the inside is falling apart. And so now you have heart disease and diabetes and all of and strokes and all of those things that come from being under stress.
Yeah, I definitely can tell you stress not only can age you can but definitely can bring on health complications. I want to take a second. I just saw a comment pop up from Sylvia Victorious from Savannah, Georgia. Thank you, Sylvia. Share the program, ask any questions. Our first guest, if you're just tuning now, is Angel Allen Townsend, and she is the author of Healing Waters, My Trail. This is the title of the book, My Trail of Tears from Pain to Peace. So, can we talk about what is or what happened in your life that required you to kind of write this book and share your story?
So do you want to know about the event or what made me say this is a story that I need to write, or a little bit of both?
Okay.
Okay. The event, I had a traumatic event, and when I was about 6 years old, my father and his friend got into a fight, and which resulted in the friend dying, and all of this happened in my presence, and my mom and I were there to witness it, and it just kind of the downward spiral happened after that. There were a lot of events that took place after that, plunge into depression, etc. But when I became an adult and I really was looking for a way out of this darkness and the pain that I was experiencing, I had a lot of if only questions as I was writing and journaling and going through therapy. If only this had happened. If only I had had interrupters. If only I had had someone to see my depression. If only I had had someone to recognize that I was abusing marijuana. If only I had had someone to 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 intervene when I was not getting good grades at school, because before this happened, I was inquisitive and super intelligent still, and the intelligence didn't go away, but the application at school did. So when I thought about the if onlys, I realized that if I'm having these feelings, that certainly there are many, many other people that can benefit from having the things that I'm thinking. If only I had had interrupters. If I can share this and and we can put interrupters in place for other families, for other children, for other uh, spouses, then maybe I can help people to avoid some of the pain I experienced. So
So,
that
Angel,
said,
do you
okay,
mind
got
if
to
I
put
go
it in
back?
writing. Pardon?
Do you mind if I go back a bit? You said that you were 6 when
Mhm.
you witnessed your father and a friend getting into an altercation and that friend dying in front of you. So, as much as you can recall, and I'm assuming you can recall it because you've written in the book, what happened to you at 6 years old that you can remember that change? What were some of the signs and things that now, as an adult, as a professional, as a consultant, um, as a whole life wellness coach, what did you go through? Because I'm hoping, again, with this program, there's something that if a person has dealt with it, I mean, some of these things are packed away until someone says something and then the switch clicks, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there were a lot of things that happened. I went from being a princess, a daddy's girl, someone who, if he was in the house, I was on his lap or on his back or dancing with him, and to someone who was overnight plunged into shock for having seen this event take place, and depression, and just became a shell of myself, because there's a stigma attached to having a person incarcerated. Unfortunately, it's a lot more common now, but at that time it wasn't common. So I was embarrassed. I began to stutter.
Okay, so there's the okay, so now I'm getting where the connection was. So it's the fact that your father was actually arrested and sent to prison for this, and
Correct.
that's when your life kind of took that spiral.
Absolutely.
Oh,
But the initial shock was just seeing this person being being killed in my presence, seeing him,
hmm
lose his life in my presence. The second shock was all of us, my mother, my father, my siblings huddled together, knowing that our lives were getting ready to change forever. I don't think my siblings and I understood this. They're younger than I am, but
sure.
we were all huddled together, and my parents were crying. So, that's you don't see your parents cry typically. So that was hard. And then seeing my father taken out in handcuffs and put into the police car, and not seeing him again free for years. All of that was very traumatizing. And all of that
What
I
did it say
witnessed.
to you after that? I mean, I would think as a parent, the first thing you want to do, right, is to embrace your child. And of course, I'm sure there's a level of shock in what happened as well. What was said to you? Was it something that just people just stopped talking about? Because I know that often happens in our communities as well. We don't talk about it, then it's not real.
No, we didn't talk. We know there was no processing, and I don't blame my parents for it. I don't, my parents were in their late 20s, mid to late 20s when all of this took place. So they didn't know how to help us cope. They were trying to figure out how to cope themselves. They had never experienced anything like this. My mom was trying to figure out how to get my dad free. My father was trying to become accustomed to being incarcerated as opposed to being home with his family. So no, we did not talk about it at all. Never. I mean, I don't think we ever talked. We didn't really sit down and address it, even specifically to this day. We talk now about, how we felt and things that went on. But no, there was no intervention, no
And
conversation.
do you find that now to be, if you were to talk to someone else whose family may have a person incarcerated, that that is something to do? Because I would think holding that in, there's so many questions, and what do you do with something like that? And then you said that you had pressure at school, you were embarrassed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that that's one of the things that I mentioned. If only I had had someone, or we had had someone say, let's talk about coping skills. Let's talk about stress management skills. Let's talk about what are you feeling? How are you feeling? How does it feel to have your father outside the house and your mom doing everything and not being as available as she was before, because she was a registered nurse. So she had a professional job, but she had to work much more than she did before my father became incarcerated, because she had to make up that income. So our lives just were turned inside out, and
So how long
nobody
did your
could do
father
anything.
serve?
Pardon?
How long did your father serve?
8 years. He was given 25 to 40. He served 8.
Wow. And did you ever go to the prison?
Every 2 weeks without fail for years.
So now let me ask you, there's a big debate about that. Hello, Joanne Thomas. So there's a big debate
Mhm.
about whether or not to take small children or children at all to a prison to see their father. What do you feel from what you experience?
Going, it was about a 2 hour drive, and going, my siblings would play, and my mom, and I was actually giddy and happy about being able to see my father, because I would not have seen him for 8 years. Seeing him as he was coming toward us and we were coming toward him to go into the visitation room, I was so excited. I was about to jump out of my skin, and being able to jump into his arms and even across that partition and have him hold me is invaluable. I would not give that up. I don't know who's saying that they shouldn't be seen. I absolutely do not agree with that. Children need to be connected with their parents if the parents are sane enough to want that connection. Having said that, going home was always very sad, very somber. I would cry the whole way home, and my mom would squeeze my hand and try to comfort me and letting me know that it's going to be okay. But no, I would not give up the opportunity to have seen him. My mother made sure we were there every 2 weeks. Unless somebody was ill, we saw my father every 2 weeks for years. And it made a
Wow.
difference. Yeah, my
Wow.
mom's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when your father got out,
Mhm.
what was that? Was there then a discussion of what dad went through, what dad did? How do you feel?
Unfortunately, my father held in a lot of anger, hurt, and rage. And when he came home, he was free, not only from being incarcerated, but to free from pretending that he was okay.
Mm.
And again, another interrupter would have been fabulous. Mandatory therapy for the spouses and for the family together. Mandatory. I think that should be a mandatory stipulation of release, because you need to learn how to get along with the family you have not lived with for X amount of time. You need to learn how to uh, get back into society. These returning citizens, I don't know a lot about what is mandatory, but I think that is invaluable. So my father came home. He was a raging alcoholic. He was extremely abusive, which really sent me on a much deeper downward spiral. And so his abuse set the stage for me to allow myself to be abused by others and to abuse myself. He
Okay.
eventually got sober, and we did have many "you hurt me, I can't believe it" conversations. And he says, "I apologize. I was in the throes of alcoholism, and I was traumatized as well." So thank God we got over it before he transitioned, and I was able to forgive him.
What a great story. So when people pick up your book, Healing Waters, what are they going to get from this? They're going to get the story, but what else will they leave with?
Well, at the end of every chapter, I have CTAs or calls to action, so that, get involved with your church's Returning Citizens program. If they don't have one, um, create one, or talk about creating one. Mentor young people in your community. There are, so every chapter has a CTA. So there are so many, and again, that's the reason I wrote the book, not to just tell my story, even though it was cathartic, but to help people navigate these waters that unfortunately so many families in our communities are experiencing. And they're leaving children without fathers. So that's what I hope that people get out of this. How do you get better? How do you navigate these waters? How do you shield your children from the pain? How do you start conversations that will help your family to heal and cope and get through this traumatic and devastating experience?
I want to take this moment now to transition and bring in our other guest. Okay. So joining us tonight here on Black Press USA and NNPA is our wonderful guest. Her name is Dr. Maxine Bryant. Good evening, Dr. Bryant.
Good evening. Good evening.
Dr. Bryant has a Master's of Arts degree from Saginaw Valley State University and a Doctor of Philosophy in Human Science degree from Walden. Now, if I'm correct, Dr. Bryant, all of your degrees have a strong focus in criminal justice and corrections. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That has been my passion since I was in high school. So, yes.
Wait, since high school?
Yes.
Wait, please elaborate.
I often say that this is my God-given calling, if you will. Real quick, when I was in high school, first of all, my high school counselor said I was not college material. Don't even waste your money, he told my mom, to send her to college. So our high school had a secretarial science program. And in lieu of going to college, he recommended that I do that. So I was learning typing. Back then it was shorthand and all of that, right? And very proficient in all of that. Our last project, my senior year, was to write about something we did not want to do. And I thought, well, what do I not want to do? Ooh, prisoners. Who would want to work with prisoners? So I did a paper on working with prisoners, and the term reentry and prison reform, none of that existed. So I wrote about being a social worker in prison, in the prison setting. And even that was almost unheard of. That paper, Taylor, changed the trajectory of my life. I knew then, after wrote that paper, I gotta work with prisoners. I have to figure out a way to help people who have been incarcerated to be successful on the other side of that. We didn't have reentry in terms of a word. So the concept, the words I did not have, but I understood that people who were incarcerated needed help on the other side. And that began my journey to try to be the best professional that I could be in the field of criminal justice, and what eventually became reentry.
Now, Dr. Bryant, so you said high school. So did you know someone? Did you have a family? Do you have a relative? and you still had that compassion just for everyone to have the right of a life that they dream of.
Much to the chagrin of my mother. She was not happy. No.
I can imagine. I mean, and you're talking about back then when I think society, I mean, we've come a long way when it comes to talking about reform and reentry and just the knowledge that not everybody who goes to prison, one, deserves to be there, and two, should be there, and that everyone that goes to prison is bad. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That was in the 70s, and we hadn't learned much at all about uh, the damage that prison does to the individual and to the families. That was not on the table to discuss. So, for an 18-year-old Black female to begin talking about, I want to help prisoners, it's like, has she lost her mind? Right? So, I had to forge a path for myself early on. And I think once my mother and realized that this was something that I was determined to do, then she began to give me the kind of support as best she could in the field that I chose to major in.
Now I see we got a comment from a Celeste Hart saying that she's commending you. Yes, saying yes, thank you. I cover wrongful convictions,
Mm.
and you know we have the Kim K's of the world, but before that there were other people too. And I honestly I have to tell you that until some of these cases were made public, I think most people who may not have had a family member that was incarcerated believed if you were arrested or if you were charged, you did what they said that you did. Now, before we brought you on, Dr. Bryant, Angel was talking about her case and how it affected her family and her childhood. And you just made a comment about how it affects the family and what research is showing. Can we talk a little bit about what your years in with the focus of criminal justice and corrections has released and shown the world?
So, what I will say is that throughout my undergraduate and even my master's degree, the the world wasn't ready to deal with the harm of incarceration. It wasn't until I began working on my PhD, and that was in 2007, right? So it's fairly recent that we began to associate the kind of trauma that Angel went through with criminal behavior, right? So, what you asked an excellent question, and there's a physiological thing that happened to Angel when she witnessed the killing of this man by her father in front of her. When a child is traumatized by something they see or experience, there's a physiological change in the brain. So we know now that if you take the brain of a person who has not experienced any trauma and the brain of a child who did experience trauma, the frontal lobes are different. There's a lot of empty space and it's physiological. So Angel could not help what happened to how her body and her mind responded to the trauma. And we're just beginning, with, let's say within the past 20 years, to recognize that so that we can begin doing what we call now trauma informed therapy, trauma informed care. So, this is new. Real quick, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was a study that was done by a Dr. Vincent Folletti, and he called a Dr. Anders to work with him. They actually did a study on weight loss. It began to help people lose weight. And what they found is after people lost about 100 pounds, they would fall off the study. They didn't continue with the experiment. What they realized is that they were using their weight to shield them, to continue to be viewed as ugly and unwanted. And as they dug further, they realized that a lot of the people who were obese or engaged in behaviors that would be harmful, smoking cigarettes, getting high, that kind of thing. They had experienced childhood trauma. They had been physically, verbally abused. They had witnessed something. It's not always just experiencing it, it can be seeing it, like in Angel's case. And a breadth of the information that we now know that connects trauma to criminal justice came out of that particular study. They studied over 17,000 people over a period of 15 years, and some good data came out of that.
Speaking of data, what are the figures? Because we know disproportionately that African Americans fill prisons all across this country at an alarming rate compared to others that live in here, even though we're only of what, 13 or 20% of the population, some number in between.
Absolutely. The Pew study of the states released that, and I'm trying to remember what it is. It was like one out of every, in some states it's worse, like in Georgia, it's like 1 out of every 3 African American men have been touched by the criminal justice system. But it's a high rate of African American, particularly African American men who experience this. And there's a book, and I know Angel has some data to share, a chart to share. There's a book written by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and it's called The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And she really connects the genetic impact of slavery that happened to Black people in terms of how we respond to it, because trauma is not only the incident that happens, it's also the learned behaviors on how we respond to that trauma. And that's can be directly linked to some of the high numbers that we see in the Black community of people being incarcerated for antisocial behavior. And that's not to take away from the injustice of the justice system for wrongly incarcerating Black men, right? That's a whole different conversation. But in terms of trauma and the fact that Black people in the United States of America have experienced a trauma like no other group. Right. And certainly that, if you follow the science about the harm for the brain, particularly the childhood brain, there's studies that show that kind of trauma sets that child up for criminal behavior, mental health, and to be in need of mental health services, and addiction.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Bryant, with you saying that there are studies that show the brain literally changes in a young person who sees something that's traumatic, as what Angel talked about, it reminds me of the saying, once you see something, you can't unsee it. So it's there. There's nothing you can do. And now you're telling me the brain has changed. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You can make things better. You can help them process it, but you can't change it. I do want to read something from Celeste Hart. I covered the murder of a 16-month-old by a boyfriend. The child's brother, age 4, 5 were in the hotel room. The brother is now 6, acting up in school. They suspended him. I want to help him, Miss Maxine. Her question is how? Thank you, Celeste.
That's definitely a wow. I'm going to answer her question, but I want to tell you a little quick story. The damage can happen even before a child is pre-verbal. When I was doing my research as doing my Ph.D., I came across a story of a young girl who witnessed something traumatic when she was maybe 2 or 3. Right? She witnessed her father kill her mother. Now, everybody thought that, she's 2 or 3 years old. She's not going to remember, right? No harm done. Well, she began acting out later in school when her behavior was no longer a turbulent 2 kind of thing. And it wasn't until a counselor intervened, an interrupter, as Angel pointed out, was able to uncover the story. So to Celeste, what I want to say is that we ask the wrong question. We ask, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get it right? And I know this to be true, even from my own ignorance, if you will. My daughter experienced trauma unbeknownst to me. I didn't figure it out until much later. but she began engaging in self-harm. And people do that because the self-harm numbs the harm from the trauma, right? And in her high school, they wanted to put her out. They wanted to suspend her, expel her. As a matter of fact, they did. And the question was, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get it right? And I would ask the same question. The correct question is, what happened to you? What happened? And give that child, particularly that 6-year-old Celeste, an opportunity to begin to verbalize to the best of his ability what incident did he see and or experience. Talk therapy is so very important, or can be, particularly for children, and using play and using music and using art as a way to help children to draw out what they may not be able to verbalize, right? So that's the first thing I would suggest is definitely talk therapy with a trauma-informed care therapist, because regular counseling doesn't uncover what needs to be touched upon with a trauma survivor. And that 6-year-old is definitely a trauma survivor. And the question needs to be, what happened? And you can ask that question. It doesn't have to be the therapist, but you need to have someone who is trauma informed to be able to come right behind you and engage in conversation and therapy with the 6-year-old. But we need to know what happened to him, and he needs to talk about that and know that it's okay.
Dr. Bryant, I want to keep you on full screen though. But Dr. Bryant, 6 years old, and even thinking about Angel when she was little, how do you get people to talk? Because obviously, the first time they're not gonna just pour it out. How do you support them? And I don't know if Celeste is a family member or she just wants to help because she has she has empathy for other people.
So ideally, like I said, it would be a trained trauma informed therapist who has the skill sets to be able to create a safe space for that child so that that child feels comfortable, and let the child know it's not their fault. Whatever they saw, whatever they experienced, it is not their fault. And then encourage them to just talk about different experiences. You don't want to necessarily hit, that thing that happened to you when you was 5. What happened? Right? But begin to and build relationship, build rapport, and help them to feel a level of comfort and trust that they can talk to you, and guide them through the question of saying, of being comfortable in answering, what happened to you? You want to
Kay
talk
had a
about it?
great Kay, we're going to keep you full screen, Dr. Bryant. Kay had a great comment. Can we bring that up? Kay says, does the brain shut
Hmm.
down to protect itself? And if so, how do you unlock it? Good question.
That is a great question, Kay. Excellent question. There are some instances where you, in layman's term, you could say the brain shuts down to protect itself. That is not a medical term, but you could say that. What we do know is that the physiological changes in the brain that happen um, do two things. One, it disrupts the regular or normal brain activity. And the second thing it does is, in a way, serve to protect the individual from remembering, right? From being re-traumatized. So, how do you help? You gotta uncover the original trauma, and that can only be safely done and best done through trauma informed therapy.
Now, Angel, you said because of what you experienced and the way your father acted, you found abusive relationships yourself.
I began to believe that what I was experiencing at home between my parents and between my father and I was okay. And I wasn't knowingly seeking out abusive relationships, but I was
Sure.
acting out what I saw at home and what I saw my parents do. So yeah, and I was very much into abusing myself. I spoke. My father spoke horribly to me, and I spoke just as horribly to myself. So my self-esteem just continued to spiral downwards because of what I was experiencing with my father.
And I truly believe we've had, women conversations where I think some men with a predatory inclination, let's say that, can identify a woman who has been traumatized
I,
and can use that to make them their victim.
mhm. And that is, I absolutely believe that, because the rape experience that I had with a person that when I was 15 and this person was near 40, it was because I know that he groomed me for that experience. And I had no idea that that was what was happening to me. So I was in two abusive, intimate relationships at the same time, with my so-called boyfriend and with this rapist at the same time. And that's only because I was accustomed to being abused. So it felt normal.
Angel, what was the turning point in your life that you were able to choose and see this is not the path, they are not the person for me?
I got, I married an abusive person, and I eventually, because I've been in therapy since I was old enough to seek therapy for myself, because I knew that what I was experiencing wasn't right. I knew that I had a lot to offer. I knew that I was intelligent and I did well in school, and I wanted to be okay, but I was in so much pain. I didn't know how to be okay. So and again, as Dr. Maxine said, there was no such thing as trauma-informed therapy. So I just went from one talk therapist to another to try to figure out what could make me feel better. And as I did that, and then I would journal a lot, I would pray a lot. I was just looking for a way to get out of this pain. And I just kind of, it's like I just kind of dug my way out of it. And I don't think now we don't have to do that because we have more options. But at that time, I was just seeking help wherever I could find it.
So I know that there's a way in question about people just saying, turn to the church and pray about it. Dr. Bryant?
Can you repeat your question again?
I know that there's a segment of the population that says, just turn to the book of to the Bible and go to your church and pray your way out of it. Your response?
Let me answer that. I am a minister. I'm a licensed minister. And I would never, ever tell a person just pray about it. Not that I don't believe God is all knowing and all able to erase the past and the pain. What I do know that is most often, we are not islands on this path called life. And so we need other people to help us, to guide us, to develop the skills that we need. Angel developed some coping skills that were positive, right? And she didn't do that all by herself. Now, I'm a firm believer God can do whatever he can do, whatever he wants to do. Firm believer in that. Not going to take anything away from the word of God, from the spirit of God, from God, not at all. But what I will say is that when we say as a church people, oh, pray about it and it'll be okay. Mm-hmm. What if it isn't? What do I do then?
Right.
What if the Lord didn't answer my prayer? What the way I thought he would? What do I do? You're not giving me anything to work with. And what if I don't feel my prayers are being heard? Then what? Then I'm likely to come away and feel God doesn't even like me. Right. And I had a lady to think that. I was working with her in Marion County Jail in Indianapolis. And I forget how the conversation happened, but I was really trying to help her just see her life differently. And she said, nobody loves me, not even God. Had somebody told her to pray about it and her prayers were not answered? Right? So no, we as the church, we need to recognize that even Jesus would use tools at his disposal to heal, right? The water, the sand, the mud, right? 2 little fishes and 5 loaves of bread, right? He used tools to perform miracles. even though there were times when he instantaneously spoke, or a person would touch the hem of his garment and they were healed. We also have many, many examples in the Bible where tools were used. Counseling is a tool. Therapy is a tool. People who can wrap their arms around us and tell us, I'm with you through this. They're spiritual, God-given angel tools. Play on angel's name, but they're tools, right? So, and I love this. Faith requires action, and faith without works is what? Dead.
Yeah.
There we go. That is so true. I want to read. There was a comment from someone. I'm trying to get up there, and I also want to come back. I'm going to go back to Celeste too. But there was a comment that someone put up there about ministers or churches. I'm going to see if my producer can pull that one up. Thank you for that, Dr. Maxine. Clergy are or can be counselors, but they are largely not therapists. Sage advice. Joanne, thank you so very much for that. I have to ask you a question because it's coming to mind when I think about this in conversations that I had before we started the show tonight, about you've got to be careful about who you go to. Not that a white therapist cannot cater to a Black child, but do you feel that the therapist should have some understanding of the child's background, community, culture?
It is critical. Oh, was that for Angel? I'll just say it's okay. It's critical. There was a study done in the 90s by a guy named Peter Bell. I was trying to remember his name. And he was an addictions counselor. And he realized even in the field of addiction, race and ethnicity mattered.
Really?
And if I don't understand the background that a person has gone through, the family, the community, the cultural trauma that they have experienced just by being virtue of who they are, and in this case, Black Americans in the United States of America, right? If I don't have a sense of that, then I can't be of much help. I'm telling my colleagues right now, I work at a PWI, a predominantly white institution, and this is what I'm telling them, Taylor. Black people are not dark-skinned white people.
Good point.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay.
They don't always want to hear that. And I figure I'm old enough anyway. I can just say what I want.
No. And I think that's an interesting comment because Dr. Bryant, it goes into where you have non-African American people who may quote unquote act as if they are African American, but they can change. They can revert back, and when someone pulls them over or stops a question, no matter who you act and who you're with, you can't change that exterior. So
Right.
you can flip flop, but African Americans, we are what we are. Am I correct? So
Absolutely.
I'm always careful about that too. Angel, on the topic of counseling, since you said that you've been in counseling since you were able to select it yourself, did you find that you found more help? Did you have Black and white helping you, male and female? How did that go for you?
I always sought out only Black people because I felt white people could not understand what I was dealing with, but I did see men and women. And I have to agree with Dr. Maxine. You have to be very careful with who you talk to because I presented well and I looked like I was okay. People, oh, you're fine. And I found more therapists wanted to go to lunch with me and become my friend because, girl, you're fine. You don't need any help. You're just the same as I am. Well, because I learned to mask it, and I needed someone that would be really, really get in there with me and really help me to uncover the pain that I did not know how to talk about. Because just to go back to being the church, I think that so many people are unchurched now because you don't get the help you need. I do not believe, again, as Joanne said, that ministers are therapists, and I felt very strongly that I felt that from a 6-year-old perspective, I felt that what happened, my father abandoned us. And I felt like he abandoned me specifically. And I asked for many years, Lord, what did I do so horrible to have this experience, to see this horrific incident in front of me, to not have my father in my life, to be raped repeatedly, to be extremely home insecure, all those things. God, what did I do that made me have these experiences. And nobody at church was talking about it. Nobody at church, the only thing that they were talking about in the church I grew up in was pass the plate and put some money in it. And if you hear anything in my voice, it is the frustration that I feel with some of the churches that are more interested in what's going into the offering plate than what's going into people's lives and their hearts and their heads. So ministers have a space, and therapists have a different space. And I don't think that if you are not a licensed therapist or have some type of training, stay in your lane and stay in the pulpit and leave the therapy to someone who knows what they're doing.
You know, and listening to Angel talk, Dr. Bryant, why do children take on the responsibility? I mean, she wasn't involved in the fight. She didn't cause the fight. Why do children or people in general, young people, take on that heavy load that it's because of me? Even in a regular divorce, kids take on and say, it's something I did. Is there anything that you can share with us in regards to research why children take on? That is a very, very heavy burden to carry for anyone.
It's an extremely heavy burden. I have not researched that particular question, but what I would think is, just based on what I do know in my experience, is that children internalize what happens in their environment. When mom and dad argue in front of them, they internalize that. And particularly if it's something that's not usual, or if it's something that happens all the time, it's like the first place they go is, it's something that I did. It's just almost an inclination for blame. And sometimes they have actually learned that by way of the parents who do indeed blame them. And when that's not the case, too often children do internalize. And I don't know the why behind that, other than it's just got to make sense in their minds, and that's where they go.
Now, there's a number of things I want to make sure that our guests, because we've got a lot of questions that came in, and you've been so great in answering them. First, I want to make sure before we go on, Dr. Maxine Bryant, you have a radio show entitled Criminal Justice and Correction. Am I saying that right? Criminal Justice and
actually, it's
Criminalized by Color. Criminalized by Color. Criminalized by Color. That is, to do that, day after day. Tell us a little bit about your show. When does it air, and how people can join you, and what you want them to do to help with your show?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that opportunity. Criminalized by Color, while it does talk about the criminal justice system, the whole purpose, I think, if I can put it that way, is to go beyond the criminal justice system and show how in every system in the United States, Blacks are criminalized. And let me say criminalized in quotes there. So in our academics and education, Black students often, teachers have learned to either expect less of them, or to expect them to be violent, to expect them to act out. And then what do? We expel them, or we suspend them. Even in the banking industry, our Black communities all too often are redlined. And so then we are not able to accomplish the American dream and get the homes that we want. So we are oppressed or criminalized, right? And so in every system, medical systems, the whole gamut, Blacks often come out on the short end. And so when I'm talking about criminalized by color, it goes beyond criminal justice. And it's really a historical perspective of how Blacks have been treated in the United States across all systems. Now, I took a hiatus during the month of January, so the show is not on right now, but coming in February the 10th, you will be able, I know, the second Thursday in February the 10th, I'm going to be on K Radio out of New York, K Radio, and you'll be able to go to my website, which is drmaxinebryant.com. And there'll be a link there for you to be able to click on the show, and you all will be able to hear more about that via social media. We're going to be promoting it heavily once we finalize all of the formats and things like that. But I'm really proud of the show. It took off like wildfire. I had no idea when I
It's a big
started.
discussion. It's a focus for a lot of people over the last year, and it's growing in strength. I want to take a second because Celeste, while both of you were talking, she also shared that basically the grandfather has custody of the children. How can Celeste and anyone else who's joining the program that may want some direction or guidance or reference, how can they reach out to either one of you? Dr. Maxine,
I'll go
Bryant?
first. Please reach out to me at trying to think which I want to give you the email that's going to reach me best. It is ms as in Sam dot maxib.com, mas.maxib at gmail.com, Ms. Maxie B at gmail.com. You can also go to my website and leave comments and questions there, and that's already been put up, drmaxinebryant.com, www.drmaxinebryant.com.
And now, Angel Allen Townsend, your book, Healing Waters, My Trail of Tears from Pain to Peace. What a beautiful sound. From pain to peace. It just makes me smile when I say that. How can they, one, get a copy of your book, and how can they keep in touch with you or support you?
I hope this is very simple. You can reach me at angel at peacefulwomanprosperouswoman.com. Angel at peacefulwomanprosperouswoman.com. That's my email address. Also, Facebook is Peaceful Woman Prosperous Woman, and you can reach me there. Really simple. And that speaks to the title of the book. I went from a lot of pain. So I feel very peaceful now. Thank God for that. A lot of work. And I believe that you cannot have true prosperity, emotional, psychological, spiritual prosperity unless you are at peace.
Can we show the cover of her book again?
And you can reach out to me at either of those locations, and I will be happy, more than happy, to get you a copy of the book. I would be honored to get a copy of the book to you. So please reach out to me at that email address or find me on Facebook.
So,
And of course,
as we close this up, because I feel like I can talk to you guys more than an hour. Angel, as we close things up, and I want to be on the peaceful healing part of this, what advice can you give to those who, one, may be in pain, or two, may know someone or see someone that you might need to question and see if they're going through something? There's no such thing as a bad kid.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say is find a trauma-informed therapist, because I think I did it the way I did it because I had to, because again, that's, as Dr. Maxine said, that just wasn't available when I needed it. But I have a lot of therapists and psychologist friends, and they tell me that even now, even though I feel like I have attained, writing the book was so cathartic and so healing for me. And as people come to me and they're healed as well, I still have friends that say, you might want to see a trauma-informed therapist just to make sure there's nothing else in there, because you went through a lot. So I would say find someone you trust and ask for referrals. There are sites that list Black psychologists, and I believe in always checking in. I believe in getting a tune-up at least once a year. Check in with your therapist. I really do. Like you go see your PCP once a year. Check in with the therapist. Continue to journal. Continue to make sure that you're getting those emotions out, and spend some time in prayer and meditation so that stuff can come up and out. And ask yourself a lot of questions. Am I okay in these areas?
I am going to tell you, I'm really pretty proud of us as a people. I've been noticing on some television shows where the Black male has come out and said they're seeking therapy, they need help. And it is just, for a woman to see that, it is really moving. because I've seen it on a hip hop show, which I thought it was a part of the show, and it was real. I mean, it went on social media. It's just wonderful to see Black men and women, but coming forward, women like Taraji P. Henson and others that have come forward to say it is okay, because I do think there's a problem when they have where you've got to be so strong that you can't cry, or you got to be so strong that you don't tell anyone what you got to be, what you went through. You've got to be so strong that you go to a place where you can't talk about it. They push it under the rug, and they either want you to pass the plate and just pray about it. But I like having this conversation because it is important that we as a people know that we can seek help. We're not alone. We're not the only one. And there is nothing wrong with you. We still have a long way to go as it pertains to, I think, sometimes the stigma that once you do that, then your company knows about it. I do think there's a level of it that still has to be worked through. But before we close out, Dr. Bryant, I'd like for you to give us some parting words of support for people who may be going through it, and for families that either have someone that's incarcerated or someone who's just come home, because I'm sure they're not the same person.
Absolutely. I want to piggyback, Taylor, on what you just said about that image of needing to be strong. I developed a workshop, and it's called My S is a Mess, right? Mm-hmm. That superwoman syndrome, that strong Black woman syndrome. My S is a mess, right? And we need to recognize that we don't have to be the strong person all the time. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I need help. It's okay to seek help. And so, since your listening audience comes from all over the country, I think what I would do is recommend that wherever you are, whatever city you are in, be very intentional, even though you may not need this information right now. When you get off from watching this show, look up trauma-informed care therapists in your community. Mm-hmm. What centers are in your community that offer trauma-informed care? You can Google it. And hopefully you will find something that is in your community. And when you come across a friend, a neighbor, a loved one, a family member, or yourself, and you find yourself exhibiting some of these symptoms that Angel talked about, being withdrawn, engaging in self-hurt, a change in personality, overeating, indulging in drugs, whether that's alcohol or street drugs or prescription drugs, being lethargic. Just there's a whole list of things that we can say trauma looks like. If you recognize it, even if you think, ask the person to consider, they don't even have to tell you, but consider what has happened to them and suggest, I'll go with you. Let's seek out some therapy together. We can pray together, but we also need to seek out that therapy.
I had no idea about the title, so I think that is an awesome challenge that you've given everybody on here. Be prepared. Already research it. So if you come across someone that you see, and I'm sure we know someone, we probably just haven't even paid attention to it.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. I tell you, I can talk to you guys for 2 hours. Angel Allen Townsend, the author of Healing Waters, My Trail of Tears from Pain to Peace, and Dr. Maxine Bryant. Oh my goodness. And she is the host of Criminalized by Color. You guys are phenomenal. I have to bring you back on, and we have to continue this conversation. This is a wonderful way to kick off the year, cleaning out the house, clean out our minds, clean out our spirits, and just be who we are and be honest and upfront. And let's start 2022 on the right foot.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Ladies, thank you so very, very much. Well, that'll do it for tonight's edition of Black Press and NNPA's FIRE program. Until next week, God bless and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good night.